There's a lot of people that are considering getting the heck out of the United States these days. It was COVID tyranny. It still is in a lot of places, but who knows? Maybe it's climate change tyranny coming next. If that's you and you're thinking about exploring life in another country, I've got an amazing resource to share with you, and that would be the Expat Money Show, hosted by Michalopulos. Whether it's foreign residencies, second passports, asset protection, or just protecting your money from the tyranny of taxation, there is no better resource than the Expat Money Show. That is for certain. Michal has spent over 20 years traveling the world, visiting more than 100 countries while living in 9 different countries over that time. He can help you legally eliminate your tax bill and travel the world in the process. So, doesn't that sound fun? It is pretty damn appealing, I gotta admit. Subscribe to the Expat Money Show today, available on podcatchers everywhere, YouTube, or just head over to expatmoneyshow.com.
You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, the icon, the hologram graph, but I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus, but I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to another episode of the Counterflow Podcast. Great to have you with me this week. I told you last week that I would try to get a good voice on this show to discuss what's going on in Ukraine with Russia, the whole thing. You know what's going on over there. Well, I hope you do, but I will admit, and I mentioned it last week, there's a lot of BS to parse through. The propaganda machine, we saw it in overdrive the last 3 years now on that certain topic that we've covered many times, but we're seeing it kicked into overdrive here once again with war, as it always is with war. And just think of it this way. The people, the news outlets, the voices that told you masks work, social distancing works, lockdowns work, the jab, wait, everything will go back to normal, right? You get the jab, you can't spread it anymore. All of those people are now telling you a lot of crazy things about what's going on in Ukraine. There's protests out in the street. I say protests, maybe it's like support rallies for Ukraine. Some of the same people that wanted your kids locked down with masks on are saying that now they care about people again. Imagine this. So my point is, be careful where you get your news from and always research it, and even take the things we say in this interview and research them. I always suggest that. I got a voice on for this episode. He's got a blog over. Now, here's the tricky part for me. He's got a blog. It's a Greek name. His name's Greek. The blog's all in English. He's a good Southern man, lives in Oklahoma, but he is, I believe, of Greek descent. We didn't actually cover that, but I'm going to assume so. His name is George Michalopulos. Check that out. Does that not sound Greek to you? And the blog, the website where he writes, him and his wife both do a great job over at this website, is Monomakhos.com, Monomakhos.com. Culture, politics, religion. He's got a lot of wonderful stuff over there. And I'm fortunate that I found him and that he was able to come do this show. He's a really kind Southern gentleman, really cool. And I think you're going to like what we have to discuss here on this episode. Let's see if I can only say his name right, maybe a couple of times, because if I push it further than that, I'm going to mess it up. But I'm so glad to get him here on Counterflow for the first time on Counterflow. Welcome to the show, George Michalopulos. How are you, sir?
Fine. How are you, Buck?
I'm really good. I'm excited to have you here. I've been reading your blog, and I thought, I came across a couple of entries, a couple of pieces you did on Russia and Ukraine, and I thought, wow, finally a seemingly well-rounded, non-mainstream take on this situation. Because, we'll talk about how the first thing to go when you start war is the truth, right? It's
Sure.
always that way. So before we get into all of that, tell my listeners really what you would like them to know about you and about your blog as well.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you for reaching out to me. I'm very flattered. very flattered. I'm just an ordinary layman, Orthodox Christian, and but about 11 years ago, at the instigation of one or two people, especially both of them being priests, they said I should start a blog. And I'm an amateur writer as it is. So they said that this would be good use of your talents. So after about a year, I listened to them and finally did it. But I said, you guys got to help me. And so they said, what do you want it to be about? I said, well, politics, culture, religion, kind of from a right-wing standpoint. And they said, that's good. And so, it's been a rollicking ride ever since. About, I'd say, halfway through it, I surrendered to the charms of the lovely Gail Shepard. Her editorial talents were pretty darn good, and we've been a team ever since. And she's taken it to a higher level, if you ask me, and improved it, to be quite honest. So,
I believe she's more than just a site improver or an editor. It's your wife, correct?
Yeah, the boss lady.
Gotcha. Well, like I said, you did some really good pieces on what's going on in Ukraine, and we'll get to that. I thought of an interesting way to start this. Let's try to present the argument from, we'll say, quote unquote, the other side. And I'd like to do that without straw manning. So for my audience listening to this might sound very familiar to them. How would you articulate the mainstream narrative on what's going on over there?
The mainstream narrative is BS. I mean, it's complete BS. I'm over 60 years old, and I have never seen this level of propaganda in my life. Okay, I grew up with the Vietnam War, and would watch Walter Cronkite, and it was critical. It wasn't rah we're winning or anything like that. Okay, and then there was the Gulf War I, Gulf War II. It was a little bit more rah, but there was a concerted effort on CNN at the time to be more fair, to give the other side of the story. And it was, I've never seen anything like this. This is like Beatlemania in reverse. So to get right to it, it's beyond ridiculous. It's bizarre. The inability to even see the other side and to clamp down, alternate news sources like RT, Ruckley, Sputnik, you name it. It leads me to wonder, what is it they don't want us to know? Okay. And let's leave it at that. I mean, we can explore that further if you'd like.
Yeah, and well, I think my listeners at least would agree with this, but I hope more people can realize we just went through 3 years where they clamped down on what was considered alternative news or whatnot. And it turns out to be that a lot of those alternative news sites were telling you the truth, a truth that's seemingly now accepted by mainstream news. They're all of a sudden admitting, well, the vaccines don't stop the spread. And maybe those masks didn't work. Hey, it turns out the lockdowns didn't work. If you were to say that 2 years ago, they'd clamp down on you. So I'm hoping that people at large have kind of learned a lesson, and they're seeing these alternative sites clamped down on, and maybe they think, maybe I should explore what those clamped down on sites are saying.
Well, and I must say here that my lovely wife has done the lion's share of the heavy lifting on the whole COVID narrative for going on 2 years now. And, she was far more skeptical than I was. And she was way ahead of the curve on all this, like gain of function and the Wuhan lab leak hypothesis, which you were not supposed to say, but now it's okay.
Right.
And so on and so forth, and the dangers of the vaccine. I need to show you something, and we'll edit it in later because I don't want to get up and interrupt the narrative flow. But I just saw a notice that was sent to me by one of my friends in Chicago, and it was from a doctor's office, and it said basically in plain English, let us know if you've been vaccinated, especially if you're a student athlete. This is a pediatrician's office, because there have been reported instances of myocarditis. Okay, and so it's like now they tell us, and I've got to hand it to Gail. She's done yeoman work in exposing the false narrative here. So yes, your larger point. Why should we believe them? They've lied to us from day one.
Yes, exactly. And you see this same propaganda lined up so quickly, like you said, maybe like we've never seen before. And I thought we just got out of 3 years like I've never seen before. Right. And let's get now closer to the truth of what could be going on over there with Russia and Ukraine. And like I mentioned earlier, the first casualty of war
is truth.
Always seems to be truth. Yeah. And luckily, I think we're fortunate that there's a large a base of alternative media sites, and they will try to clamp down, but it's kind of like whack-a-mole. They'll shut one down, but another one pops up. Right. And so I think it's like you and me. I think we kind of have a duty to kind of get some of this out. So you mentioned in one of your pieces, this was put brilliantly, I thought. Obviously, Russia is losing the information war on this. The progressive Western elites basically control everything, so they kind of get to dictate to us what they want us to believe is going on over there. We've seen this ridiculous bad propaganda about Ukraine with this ghost of Kiev, these cardboard guns, the fake photos. It's clearly, obviously, this Western propaganda machine is, I would say, in overdrive. So let's take this from a macro view first, and then we'll kind of get into the weeds.
Sure.
Tell my listeners generally, broadly, what's going on with Russia and Ukraine.
Well, okay, first of all, as an Orthodox Christian, I am flabbergasted and hurt beyond measure that two Orthodox countries are fighting like this, okay? I really am. And we need to pray for a peaceful and speedy resolution to this and repentance on both sides. I really do believe that, okay? Having said that, Zelensky and his handlers in the West have been given ample opportunity to negotiate. Zelensky, I believe, is a puppet, and he was being goaded into battle. Okay, he never controlled the street per se. Pravy sector and the far right did there. Ukraine is basically a failed state. Let's just lay it right there. I mean, and it has been. And even under the best circumstances, if it's reconstituted peacefully after this war, it's still going to be a failed state without huge infusions of Western capital. Okay, it just is. It's according to the OECD, it's the most corrupt state in Europe. It approaches African levels of corruption. Okay, so whether this happened or not, eventually Ukraine was going to collapse one way or the other. Okay, Putin pulled the Band-Aid off. Okay, now, given the fact that there was no real central legal controlling authority in Kiev, the West dangled these carrots in front of Putin. In front of Zelensky and other oligarchs. That NATO is a possibility, and the EU is a possibility, and as far as the Minsk Accords, you signed them, but don't enforce them. If you guys want to keep on bombing the eastern regions, the Donbass, we'll look the other way. Okay, and so whatever legal authority existed in Ukraine thought that the West would have their back, and so they decided they kept on doing what they were doing. And then they foolishly said, this, I think the day before he attacked, Putin attacked, Zelensky said, we will look into the idea of getting nuclear missiles in Ukraine. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, from what I understand. And that was just unacceptable. And Putin said that for years. This is unacceptable. We want a neutral Ukraine. Okay. And so I think that's the backstory.
And talk about, for those that aren't aware of the NATO presence and creeping closer and closer, mm-hmm. and Putin had warned against this for a long time.
Right, exactly. In 92, the United States and Germany signed an affidavit, a memorandum, in which they said that if the Soviet Union continues to break up, and that's okay, we will not push NATO eastwards. And that was an ironclad promise. Putin put it out. It was on a piece of paper, signed. And obviously the United States did not abide by that, and they kept on pushing forward. Poland, then the Baltic states, Romania, so on and so forth. So they violated their own agreement. Okay. And by the way, George Kennan, the author of the containment policy back in 1947-48, under the title Mr. X, said that, and he died in 99, but he said this is the wrong thing to do. Do not push NATO's boundaries forward. Do not do it. Kissinger said the same thing. There's a viral video going around by John Mearsheimer in which the title of it is, and I think you should go look for it, is called "Why Is Ukraine the West's Fault?" And he said the same thing. All the realists in the world said there's no reason to push NATO forward and to not keep Ukraine neutral. There's no reason at all. Okay, it's a kumbaya atmosphere. Everybody's happy. Okay, unfortunately, we pushed it forward, and interestingly enough, in '99, Putin went to Bill Clinton and said, "Look, can we join NATO?" In other words, Russia, the Russian Federation, and Clinton, laughed him off. So. We have done nothing but provide a series of provocations to the Russian Federation, bear baiting, so to speak. And there's only so much provocation any human being, any human institution, any country can take. And so they snapped and they fought back.
What do you think the difference is with Biden having taken over after Trump was president? Because this didn't seem to be an issue when Trump was president, and now people are, there was this whole narrative out there like, well, him and Putin are in cahoots and all of this stuff, but Putin didn't do any of this when Trump was president. What's different about Biden?
I don't know. Well, I mean, given the fact that the man has got cognitive issues. And I don't even think he's any more control of the deep state than Trump was, to be quite honest with you. Every time I try to think of something, for instance, Biden, one of the first things he did besides cancel the XL pipeline, which would have helped make us energy independent, he lifted the sanctions off of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Well, both of those were boons to Putin. They were gifts to him.
Right.
I literally, I don't know whether he's insane and doesn't know what he's doing, or the deep state is more or less okay with chaos.
Yeah.
And whether it results in a provocation, or these provocations result in war or not, they're okay with it. because they're heavily invested in oil. The price of oil went, 3 weeks ago was $70 a barrel. Now it's $110 a barrel. Well, somebody's making money off of that. If you're invested in it, the price of gold has shot through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
It just comes to my mind that maybe the deep state, they don't have our backs as far as the American people. All they care about is creating enough division and chaos out there and war and military conflict because it suits their purposes. I just don't think that makes sense to me. Otherwise, and if that's the case, then we are screwed. Really.
You wrote about Russia's tactical strategy, which I found interesting as well. The opposite of shock and awe, which is, that's kind of what we're used to seeing, especially those of us who remember the original shock and awe. Talk about the difference with their tactic and what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So they're going in, they're probing like with bayonets, and they keep on going forward until they meet resistance, and they stop. Then they consolidate what they got, encircle it, and they keep on going forward in other ways. There's two phases: the soft phase and the cauldron phase. And the soft phase is get what you can, as much as you can, as unviolently as possible, if that's a word, to allow civilians to leave and the regular military to lay down their heavy artillery. Okay, they can keep their sidearms. Okay, surrender with honor. And then comes the cauldron, which is the complete encirclement and the pounding. I mean, and heavy bombardment, because at that point the people who are left are probably the bitter enders. Okay, so. And the Russians are taking their time. They can do this, okay, or they feel that they can do this, and they can take their time. And of course, this causes a lot of I don't know what you would say, consternation among the Ukrainians, because a lot of them are now thinking, well, is NATO going to come to our aid? Yes or no? Yes, we'll hold out. No, let's start making our side bets. Let's start getting out. The oligarchs, from what I understand, have left. Only Poroshenko, I believe, is left in Ukraine. But all the other ones have bugged out for Cyprus, London, Israel, wherever, and they've taken their wealth with them. So,
what is
so the military thing is starve them out, bombard them, but at the same time keep on doing negotiations with them instead of stopping military action to do negotiations. Do both, and that puts pressure on Kiev.
What is Putin's ultimate goal, do you think, in this?
Well, to hear the mainstream media, he wants to conquer the world. That's insane.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And then others who are less insane say, well, he just wants to conquer Europe. That's it. Again, that's not any more sane. It's not. Now, his ultimate goal, I think, I don't know if you saw the military situation maps, but he's pretty much got what he needs and wants. Whether he wants to, the military situation, let's just talk about the geostrategic situation. He wants a neutral Ukraine. Okay? That means no NATO membership, no EU membership, no missiles. You're neutral. You're Finlandized. Okay? That's what he wants. Okay? And how that deals out on the ground, does that mean that he confiscates 1/3 of eastern Ukraine territory and closes off all the seaports so that the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea are Russian lakes for all practical purposes? Yeah, sure. Okay, possibly. my take on this is that because he uses the Russians believe, what von Clausewitz believed, that war is just the is the application of politics by other means. That he's got more than enough land that he can now start negotiating from a position of strength. He goes, "Oh, you guys want Odessa back? Fine, but denazify. You guys want Kharkiv back? Fine, but you're gonna neutralize. You're gonna be neutral." I think his end game is perfectly sane. I just do. I don't see how we can believe anything that the mainstream media tells us about his grand delusions to conquer the whole world or all of Europe or even all of Ukraine. I just don't see it.
I'm here to tell you guys about the best shaving products I've ever used. They're over at oldpostroadoils.com. These guys sent me the shaving soap for men and the aftershave oil for men. Both are incredible. I have to say, the aftershave oil for men blew me away. It smells amazing, which is important, but there's no chemicals. It's all natural, and it's actually really good for your skin. It's not one of these things that burns or dries your face out. And let's face it, I'm 45 years old. It's time to make sure I'm taking care of my face so I don't look like an old man in a few years. But women, they've got stuff for you too. They've got rejuvenating oil for women and specialty soap for women. And I know a lot of you guys have beards. They've got the Old Post Road beard oil for men. So check this stuff out. It's really good. They've got hand and body wash and things like that too. I'm telling you, this aftershave oil for men is the best I've ever used. I highly recommend it. And these guys are a very small company, veteran owned, and they support this show. So they're going to give you free shipping when you enter promo code BUCK at checkout. That is BUCK, B-U-C-K, at checkout over at oldpostroadoils.com. Go check them out. Let's get back to the show. You just used it, and I was going to ask you this. What is that term denazify? Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, sure.
In regards to
that's his word. Okay, the Pravy sector, the Svoboda, and the Azov battalions, the main fighting forces of the Ukrainian far right, are, very far right. If we accept the right-left paradigm. I don't necessarily. They idolize Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Okay, they do. You can see that in their iconography, their imagery, and the runes that they use. Okay, and they openly talk about what a great man Stepan Bandera was, and who was the leader of the Ukro-Nazis back in the day. So it's not my terminology; it's theirs. Now, personally, I have a problem with calling Hitler a man of the right because he was a socialist. So he was a national socialist.
Right.
And anyway, so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. All I will say is that by denazify, what that means is, as far as Putin is concerned, and it may be a propaganda point as far as he's concerned, I'm not sure, is that these extremist militias, which idolize Hitler and are doing most of the fighting and have done most and performed most of the atrocities in the East, he wants them brought to account, whether exiled from Ukraine or executed or brought to trial or whatever. I mean, that's what he means by denazify. That's what he means by denazify. Okay, and I've got to be honest with you. I mean, these guys, they're hardcore. I mean, I admire their fighting capabilities. I don't like how they're doing it. They're hiding behind human shields. Okay, I mean, they are. And they prevented ordinary Ukrainian civilians, even in the West, from leaving and escaping these humanitarian corridors, because then they would lose their human shields. So that's what I mean by denazify.
What? And it's excuse me. It's interesting. I was talking to a friend, and he said, "Imagine if there really were fighting forces within Ukraine that were actual Nazis." And I'm like, there are. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a thing because of the bias of the Western media. For some reason, obviously, they don't want to discuss that
Mhm.
because it kind of, that's, you're not supposed to support the Nazis. But
Well,
there actually
exactly.
are people that, like Hitler, they're using that, like you said, the same iconography. Do you know what would you say what proportion of their fighting force in Ukraine are these people?
I don't know. I've heard. Excuse me. Maybe this will be better. I've heard 10%, maybe 20%.
Yeah.
But then again,
Same. Okay.
as they say, it's not the size of the dog in the fight; it's the size of the fight in the dog. These guys can fight. I mean, I'll give them that. Now they fight in dirty ways, hiding behind human shields and all that. But they are very committed to their cause, and they don't speak for all of Ukrainians by any stretch of the imagination. They don't, but they control the street, okay, and they're brutal, and so your average Ukrainian civilian, he's not going to stand up to them. It'd be suicidal.
Let's talk about the United States in this whole debacle.
Yeah.
What role does the U.S. government play right now, and then contrast it with what role do you think they should be playing?
Well, let's go to the second one first. They should be an honest broker. Okay, they should be. We won the Cold War. Ronald Reagan. They asked him, well, as far as the evil empire, what's the game plan? He goes, we win, they lose. Well, we won, they lost. Reagan was not some belligerent to the end. He goes, no, let's welcome them now into the family of nations. That's what we should be doing, and that's what we should have been doing. But unfortunately, we have been, for many reasons, but nothing but a source of provocations. Okay, and I think it has to do with the military-industrial complex, if you ask me. Okay, and the stranglehold of neoconservatism over the conservative movement, which has taken what we believe about democracy and republicanism and liberalism, properly understood, and hijacked it for their own ends, their own internationalist ends. So what we should be doing is just being a referee, being the hegemon, and saying, well, let's have peace. Okay, let's sign an accord. Okay, let's try to make it work. But instead, no. What we have been doing is baiting Zelensky, holding out some carrots, letting him think that we've got his back, and in the meantime, just doing whatever we can to provoke conflict wherever in the world. I will say this about Trump. He was the exception to this. He wanted to get us out of Afghanistan. He wanted to get us out of Syria. He wanted to get us out of Iraq. He wanted there to be peace between Israel and the Arabs. So the Abraham Accords were signed. He was not a warmonger, in other words. And unfortunately, going all the way back to Bush 41, he was the only one. Okay, Now we've reverted to form. I'll say this: Barack Obama dropped more bombs during his 8 years than Bush did in his 8 years. And they added it up about one every 20 minutes of his administration. It got to be so bad that the Air Force actually ran out of ordnance at one point. So, and he was an anti-war candidate.
Right. Yeah.
So he was
Bush too was kind of Bush too was almost anti-war in his rhetoric when it first started, and then we had 9/11, and that all went out the window, unfortunately. But it's funny. A friend of mine had said the anti-war. I think it might actually a friend of mine. It might be the great Dr. Ron Paul has said the one who's anti-war, at least in rhetoric, typically will win the election. And unfortunately, they seem to go back on it once they do win the election. And that's been
That's true.
An issue.
If I may interject here, Obama, I think, really was anti-war. But he was groomed, and there's a memo to this effect that the Pentagon said, what can we do to defang the anti-war movement, which was growing under Bush Cheney, okay? And they said, well, what you need to do is get groom some good-looking guy, maybe with an Islamic name, put him in as president, as an anti-war candidate, and then just kind of like engineer events to make him backtrack. And the anti-war movement died under Barack Obama. So take that as you will.
My favorite sponsors and yours, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. They've got some new products that I will be telling you about. As always, I can tell you, Carlos and Vanessa, the owners of PalomaVerdeCBD.com, wonderful people. So when you buy from them, you're supporting a great couple that are like-minded, and it helps support this show that I know you love. Check out these new products. They've got the CBD massage oil. Let your mind wander on that one for a bit here. They've got the full spectrum unflavored CBD tinctures. Check this out, ladies. After a hard day at work, how does a CBD bath bomb sound to you? Well, they've got those now. They've got the CBD soft gels, of course, the CBD gummies, mint tinctures, the salve stick, and of course, the pet treats, the stuff that my French bulldogs, Lux and George, both use every morning. Now, you've heard me rave about the sports cream before. I'm going to read you something one of my friends and listeners wrote to me specifically about that. Last year, I gave my dad a bottle of the Paloma Verde sports cream as part of a present for his 86th birthday. He's very active, walking 3 to 4 miles a day, as well as working with a strength and conditioning coach. Still, his back often bothered him because, well, no prescriptions that he takes ever fixed it. Well, he found the Paloma Verde cream to be very effective in relieving the occasional discomfort. Last week, he slipped on some ice in his driveway and suffered from, thankfully, minor injuries, including his back. For 3 days, he was unable to sleep due to his back pain. He had run out of the Paloma Verde cream, so I gave him the link to the reorder. It arrived within a day or two, and he immediately began using it. He sent me this text the next morning after enjoying his best night's sleep in almost a week since the fall. Quote, "The cream application last night worked like a charm. I was pain-free in just about any position." Unquote. In addition, my sister, who was staying with him, was so impressed by his results that she ordered some for her husband, who regularly experiences leg pain at night. My dad resumed much of his regular activity and attributes much of his recovery to the Paloma Verde sports cream for the pain relief and just how much it helped him get the much needed rest at night. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a honest-to-God true statement. Someone wrote to me about this cream that I'm telling you, I always brag about how amazing it is. You will find it at PalomaVerdeCBD.com, where you will get 25% off of your order when you use promo code BUCK at checkout. That's BUCK at checkout for 25% off of your order. Go support them and support this show. You will not be sorry. Let's get back to the show. Right. Another thing that seems conveniently pushed under the rug, we can say, the Biden family and the money that they have received via Ukraine, not talked about. Again, this came out during the election, leading up to it. That story was squashed, of course. It was. Yeah. And then I believe it was allowed to be discussed once he, quote unquote, won. The family ties, the money that the Biden family has made from Ukraine. Talk about what you know on that.
I'd love to. I'd love to. If you ever doubted that the mainstream media is nothing but controlled propaganda, that pretty much was laid to rest back in October 15 of 2020, when the New York Post came out with the laptop, and it was explosive. And within 72 hours, it died. And if it had been Don Trump Jr. or Eric Trump, it never would have gone away. But because it was Biden's son, Hunter, his child, his 50-year-old child, troubled one, it died. I mean, even and Twitter came down and cut off the New York Post, which is, I think, the nation's oldest newspaper, founded by Alexander Hamilton, if I remember correctly. And, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, he got paid $83,000 a month to sit on the board of Burisma doing nothing but twiddle his thumbs. And, he's not the only one. Paul Pelosi is the son of Nancy Pelosi's, is on the board of directors of some companies, as is one of John Kerry's stepsons. And as far as Mitt Romney, I think one of his campaign directors is on. We're talking about the swamp, okay? Let's just highlight it right there, the swamp, okay? And now let's just go to Ukraine. Ukraine is a launching pad for a lot of money laundering, okay? A lot. And it is where the various swamps of the world have set up shop. And I'm not even talking about the Biolabs. Okay. So I'm sorry. Didn't need to do that.
Yeah, we got to talk to we will talk about this.
Yeah. Okay. All righty. So, I mean, what else can I say? It's just that there are lots of oligarchs in Ukraine, or used to be. They've bugged out. And they have multiple passports, and Ukraine. The Ukraine is a staging ground for a lot of nefarious trafficking that's done on an international basis.
Let's talk about those biolabs.
Yes.
That's another interesting story I've seen reported, and again, you covered it in your writings. Is that that seems to be a strategic thing, is attacking certain areas in Ukraine where there are biolabs. What do you know about that?
That they were taken out immediately, and that these biolabs are funded, like Wuhan was, through nefarious means, by elements of the United States government, because they can't do it here because of law. So they do it in other countries. And from what I understand, the biolabs in Ukraine were done to release things like hemorrhagic fever and stuff like that. It's a good way to control the population. And it's also a good way to do research and development. Okay. And so the biolabs were there. Some say there were at least 8. Others say there were 11. From what I understand, they were taken out the first day. And as well as was Gostomel Airport. I believe that's the main airport in Kiev. And that was taken out to prevent oligarchs from leaving. So this, what President Putin did was pretty strategic. Surgical is the word I should use. But,
NATO.
The biolabs are not a good idea. I think we can all agree. We can all agree.
What's your view on NATO?
My view is what Dwight Eisenhower told John Kennedy when he handed over the keys to the White House. He said, if NATO is still in existence in 10 years, we will have failed. I guess Ike was still under the impression that, as was George Kennan, that the Soviet Union, the whole Soviet system, the empire would fall within 15 years after he wrote his his piece for Foreign Affairs magazine, under the nom de plume of Mr. X. He didn't sign his name; he just said Mr. X. So that brings us to about 1963. Maybe 1965, so that the Soviet Union would have fallen by then, and there would be no need for NATO. So, clearly they were wrong on the dating of it. I mean, but the Soviet Union did fall. I guess, 30 years later. And unfortunately, NATO not only set up shop in Poland, but everywhere else in the Warsaw Pact. Okay. And so my opinion is we don't need NATO. I believe what Pat Buchanan said back in 92, come home, America. And we didn't.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And speaking on the narrative, back to that, the last episode I discussed the danger of propaganda and something like the Russiagate story that some people still, to this day, some people still believe. We can laugh at it and look at how ridiculous that was. And oh my God, idiots fell for that. But because of CNN, the New York Times, NBC, right now, we still have ordinary progressives who want war with Russia, specifically Putin, because in their mind, he gave us all Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Again, I looked back for many years and thought, what kind of idiots would fall for such a ridiculous story? Then it came out that it wasn't true. But it seems like if it's going to lead at least to an attitude, a general feeling for a decent portion of this country that we should go to war with a nuclear armed country because of something that's not real, seems dangerous to me, more dangerous than I initially thought, with just kind of controlling the left's minds and warping them and making them upset for 4 years. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I mean, it's sad. I mean, if you're going to go to war, you better have good intel and good reasons to do it. Okay, we all now say Iraq was wrong, but we believe that there were WMD there and that Saddam Hussein was a material breach of UN resolutions. So we had the right under the UN to go in and take them out. We were lied to, in retrospect. Okay, but at least we believed that it was true. Okay, I don't want to refight that. But that was 20 years ago. Now the level of mendacity and uncredibility that we are facing with, as far as the mainstream media is concerned, shows us that we can't even believe a darn thing they say. Okay, and so it's probably all a lie. You could pretty much just place your bets and say, yeah, if they say it's going to rise, if the sun's going to rise in the east, I'm going to go out and check tomorrow, because these guys have so mismanaged the truth. It's not even funny. I can't explain the level of hysteria except for this, and that is that Donald Trump has so scrambled their brains that anything that's associated with Donald Trump in his 4 years in the White House, which they can't abide, they cannot get their heads around, is what's causing them to feel this way about Putin, because Putin and Trump got along. Putin and Trump are populists. They're both nationalists. They're both patriots. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Now that Trump is gone, they've switched their fantasies to Putin. He's the demon which lives in their heads, and they can't let go of it. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. I hope I'm wrong. I don't know what.
Also, one of the interesting aspects that you specifically, I can ask this about, is the Orthodox Christianity populations. You alluded to it earlier. Russia and Ukraine have, I think, possibly the largest Orthodox Christian populations on the planet. What's the history there, and what's happening in that regard as far as orthodoxy with each country?
Well, okay, Russia is the largest Orthodox country. Ukraine would be the second, although Ukraine is canonically part of Russia. I mean, if you want a brief history, you go back to 988 AD when Grand Prince Vladimir the Great baptized the Russian nation, so to speak, in the Dnieper River. And it's not the Russian nation, it was Kiev and the Rus. And out of Kiev and the Rus grew Belarus, which was White Russia, Russia, which is Great Russia, and then Malorussia, which is Little Russia, or what we now is called Ukraine, which that name was given to them by their Polish conquerors. Complicated, but Kiev is the heart of Kiev and the Rus, of the whole Rusian or Russian prospect. The whole narrative, the historical narrative, began in Kiev. Okay. Now, unfortunately, in more modern times, Patriarch Bartholomew of Istanbul decided, for reasons that escape me, we can speculate, to take Ukraine, the Archdiocese of Kiev, away from Russia and put it back under Constantinople, and then give it autocephaly. Now, he didn't give it autocephaly. It's not real autocephaly by any stretch of the imagination. As far as
can you explain that term really quick?
Yeah, autocephaly. Autocephaly is self-headedness. Okay, there's no Orthodox church. There are Orthodox churches. Okay, each one of them is autocephalous. Okay, they're self-headed, and by either a patriarch or a metropolitan. Okay, and usually he's the archbishop of the capital city. Okay, the Church of Greece, for instance, is headed by the Archbishop of Athens. Okay, the Patriarchate of Serbia is headed by the Metropolitan of Peć, which was an ancient name. It's associated with Serbia, with Belgrade somehow. The Patriarchate of Antioch is headed by the Archbishop of Antioch, even though he lives in Damascus, Syria. So so each Orthodox church is self-headed. They owe nothing to the other Orthodox churches except brotherly love and unity in faith. Okay, so the granting of autocephaly is usually something done by an ecumenical council or just some council. Now, Patriarch Bartholomew was under the impression that he could grant autocephaly on his own, and that's very problematic. I don't want to get into it right now, but that's not true. And anyway, how he did it by cleaving off an archdiocese that did not want autocephaly, the Archdiocese of Kiev, in other words, all of Ukraine, and then transferring it to himself in trust until he granted autocephaly to it was very scandalous. Okay, and well, I mean, let's leave it at there. I mean, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of canons, but we can another time if you'd like. But
yeah,
in doing so, he added an irritant into Ukraine because 90% of the Ukrainians who are Orthodox did not go along with him. They remained true to Metropolitan Onufri, who's the real Archbishop or Metropolitan of Kiev. Okay, and he sits on the Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church. It's an autonomous archdiocese, by the way. It's an autonomous eparchy. They have way more autonomy than the phony outfit that Bartholomew created around Sergei Dumenko, the so-called Metropolitan of Kiev. Okay, so now, and in the interim, up until now, there's been a low-lying civil war and civil disturbances between the false church that Bartholomew created and the real church under Onufri. I mean, there were like clashes, violent clashes, in which Epiphany, the false metropolitan, tried to send goons in to take over the property of churches that did not belong to him. Okay, and there were fistfights and worse. Okay, so that's one reason why I believe, unfortunately, Ukraine is a failed state. It was just on the last 2 years have not been a walk in the park for them, ecclesiastically speaking. There's been a lot of violence, internecine, intra-ethnic violence based on the false church created by Bartholomew and the real church. So.
That's interesting. So it's almost like a false church was propped up there, and
Yes.
a false government was essentially propped up there.
Yeah. And cui bono, that's the Latin, who benefits?
Yeah.
Well, you wonder. It's not the Ukrainian people, because they're suffering right now. And they were suffering before now, not to the extent that they're suffering now, but still it was a low intensity type of intra-ethnic suffering and violence that was going on. And of course, when you install a joker like Zelensky, who, I don't know if you've seen some of his videos. I mean, the guy's, he was a comedian. I won't go into detail, but I'll hyperlink them and I'll send them to you if you'd like. When you install a joker like that, who either is working in tandem with the West or is being duped by the West, I don't know. So, take that for what it's worth. Yeah. Certainly Russia's not benefiting. Certainly the Ukrainian people are not benefiting. Let's leave it at that.
Do you see any possibility that, I hate to even, just saying is a bit chilling, any possibility of nuclear weapons becoming involved in this conflict?
Yes. Yeah. There's a possibility. Is there a probability? I'd say no, but there's a possibility. And Putin did 2 nuclear options. He raised that possibility, and also yesterday he put Russia on the gold standard. That's a nuclear option. That is a dagger at the heart of the petrodollar. And it's, from what I understand, it's stabilizing the ruble so that the economic collapse that was feared and hoped for by many in the West of Russia is not going to happen. The Chinese and the Indians are now drawn even closer to Russia. And it's, I don't want to go too much into the gold standard, but it's a wonderful thing as far as the Russians are concerned, but it's a horrible thing as far as we are concerned, because we're on the petrodollar, and that's fiat currency. You mentioned Dr. Ron Paul earlier in the interview, so you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say fiat currency.
Yes.
So that's an economic nuclear weapon that he just unsheathed. As far as the real nuclear weapons, if he has to, he'll do it. And you know what? Here's the deal. What has he got to lose? Because we have so demonized Russia right now. And unfortunately, one of our senators called for his assassination, which is a war crime to do so.
Yes.
So what does he have to lose? I mean, somebody better take away the matches from people in the West, and start, thinking about ways to de-escalate this thing really quick.
There's always situations where the elite, they will take advantage of tragic moments to power grab, basically. And oftentimes it's they have these things kind of plans on the back burner, and then boom, something happens, and it's like, hey, let's pull out those plans. We've had those sitting there. Right. Power grabs. Has there been anything sneaking through that you've seen that kind of we all have our attention on what's going on in Ukraine, oftentimes there's something that you're taking your eye off of back home. Have you seen anything like that yet? Anything come to mind?
Well, we're no longer living under lockdowns and mandates, are we? That kind of
Right.
went away.
But I'm just worried. What are they thinking that they can sneak through without us looking at this point?
Don't know. I mean, BLM riots again. The vaccine mandates. Maybe they could do the vaccine passports instead of mandates. That's a good question. I mean, God only knows. They're going to do something, and I'm convinced they're going to do something. Or it could be this. The deep state took a major hit with January 6th so-called insurrection. Okay, they saw that it was not that hard to take over the Capitol. Okay, and my favorite picture was that one old guy who was sitting in Nancy Pelosi's chair with his feet on her desk. I mean, that is it was humorous. But, if you're an oligarch or a tyrant or even a legitimate leader, you don't want to see some peasant with his feet on your desk. You just don't, okay? So January 6th was a huge wake-up call for them. Of course, the biggest wake-up call for them was when Trump was elected. That wasn't supposed to happen, okay? Mm-hmm. It was in the bag for Hillary. Something happened. They lost control. Okay, so the second thing that they lost control of, and that they're reacting from in fear, was the trucker convoy in Canada. So basically, what I'm trying to say is the deep state is not as powerful as we think they are. They're very resourceful, but they're reacting to events. Okay, so far, they're winning. They didn't win in Canada, by the way. I don't think so. And so they're reacting to Putin now because he's not a deep state agent. He is, going after the deep state in the Ukraine. So, what's going to come down the pike? I don't know. I still think that we're just one more shooting of an unarmed black man away from another summer of riots, and it's I'll say this: in 1989, the Soviet Union left Afghanistan in an orderly fashion. By the way, militarily, they left in a very orderly fashion. Within 2 years, the Soviet Union collapsed; it fell. We left Kabul in a disorderly fashion. I mean, in a way that was comical, except that it was tragic. Leaving $85 billion worth of arms and materiel on the ground to be sold on the black market, I suppose, or used by the Taliban. And are we going to fall within 2 years? Are we going to fracture apart as a nation? Don't know. It's just an interesting parallel, don't you think?
It is. Yeah. Now you've got my mind thinking.
Yeah.
Where do you see this, if you had to give a prediction, let's say in 6 months to a year, not here necessarily in the U.S., but in Ukraine with Russia, where do you see this kind of ending up or going?
Well, it's not going to be pretty. And I would say that the end game for Russia are several different things. One would be the removal of Zelensky. Another one would be the unification of the Eastern republics, the Donetsk and Lugansk republics, into Russia. In other words, the redrawing of the borders of Ukraine to Russia's advantage. The neutralization of whatever is left of Ukraine, denazification to the extent that you can do it, the elimination of the Ukrainian Air Force, the elimination of the Ukrainian Navy. The Russians will take those as wins, even if they're Pyrrhic wins. They're still wins because they have totally. Now, further down the road, I see the fracturing of the European Union because a lot of cooler heads are going to prevail in some of these countries. They're going to say, well, why do I need to go fight for Ukraine? Okay. And then again, the nuclear bomb, the economic nuclear bomb that Putin just dropped is going to cause inflation. And I mean, we're already living under an inflationary scheme right now, but it's going to be hyperinflationary. And when things get to be hyperinflationary, they become very unstable. Okay, so I think Europe will start breaking apart little by little. As far as NATO is concerned, what Trump wanted was for them to pay their fair share. That's not going to happen. The Germans are the weak link here. The Germans are going to say, well, let's rebuild that pipeline after all. Okay. When it came time to remove Russia from SWIFT, everybody was on board, but the Germans held back. They said, well, yeah, let's kick off some of these banks, but not all of these banks. So that's the worst of both worlds. I don't want to get too much into the economics of this, but if you're going to remove Russia from SWIFT, you got to do it completely. Okay, they didn't do it completely, and in the meantime, it just woke up the Russians up and said, "Well, we'll just go with KIPS. That's another financial transactional platform that the Chinese came up with." So now they're with that, and so now the Indians are with that, and then in the meantime, everybody else in the world is thinking, "Wait." Our nations have confiscated the gold assets that belong to Russia that are in our country, not in Russia. We've confiscated yachts that belong to Russian oligarchs. We've confiscated property that belongs to Russian citizens, not all of them oligarchs. Again, Russians who are expats not living in Russia. That's not a good thing. Okay, just like we found during the trucker convoy that we found out that the Trudeau government confiscated the bank accounts of people and redirected the PayPal accounts to BLM or Planned Parenthood or whatever. That woke us up. Said, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that." I thought I thought my bank account, I thought my insurance policy was an ironclad contract between me and a private institution. Now it's woken us up. It's woken up the Russians up. And so everybody's looking for parallel arrangements now. If you're smart, the Russians are smart. Yes. They're setting up parallel arrangements with China and India and Pakistan. So I can't remember what the question was. I'm sorry.
No, that's just where things are headed in the next 6 months to a year. You've already.
Okay, so there will be hyperinflation in the West. It will fracture. It will continue to fracture our airlines here in America. I mean, what we saw with the COVID hysteria followed by the George Floyd hysteria was that we're no longer one nation under God. We are very close to not secession per se or an American Civil War. It won't be that clean because there's no Mason-Dixon line. But we will fracture in red states and blue cities. And there will be violence. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's not going to be pretty. Will we survive as a unified nation? Well, that's an open question. I think so. I will say this, though, that during the election, John Podesta told the electors of California, Oregon, and Washington that if it looks like Trump was going to win, that they should secede. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I guess that means that a state can secede after all. And based on our own the own demographic insolvency that's here in America, I just don't see us surviving as a unitary state or polity. I just don't, especially if the economic situation spirals out of control, which under hyperinflation it will.
What are, if any, news sources that you trust?
Good question. Well, I try to go to RT, believe it or not. Abruptly, I go to Orthodox Christian. They're really good. I actually have contacts in Russia. As far as the mainstream media, boy, I say none. So, okay, I'd go to Tim Pool, Timcast. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
By the way, the other day he was swatted 3 different times in one night.
Yeah.
That's a record.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's definitely getting close. As they say in the Air Force, you catch a flak, you're over the target. Okay. Another one is, and he's a comedian, is Jimmy Dore. Okay.
Yes.
Now he's very left wing. I don't agree with his economic stance on anything, but he's an honest liberal. Okay, honest, anti-war liberal, and I'll grant him that. And he's a comedian, but you'll get far more objective news from Jimmy Dore than you will from Sean Hannity. So let's see who else. There's this guy named Styx Hexenhammer. He's really good at analyzing the things. He's a pagan, a neo-pagan. A Second Amendment absolutist. You put me on the spot, but I'd start with those 3. As far as ecclesiastical ones, I would go with Taylor Marshall, even though he's Catholic. Okay, he's pretty straight. It's 90% Catholic problems, but still, you get a good take, a good traditional take. The Vortex, that's another Catholic one. The very conservative. Let's just go there. I guess from now on, I'll start going to you too. I didn't hear about you until you reached out to me.
Well, this is what I appreciate about this. A few aspects. It's interesting, and I don't know. I guess all you can do is laugh. That if someone asked me that same thing, you have to think about it. It's sad that you can't just go, oh, boom, 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 boom. Because there's so many bad sources. You've got to really dig to find the good ones. And I appreciate, I think it would be appropriate from what I do know about you to say that you're a at least right-leaning Orthodox Christian, and you gave me a left-winger who's honest, Catholics who are honest, a neo-pagan who is honest. So you're not pigeonholed into, I only focus on this thing that I am. I appreciate that you cast a broad net and found a few honest seeds here and there. I think it's good as well. Yeah. Also, a few as we go, just off the top of your head, you don't have to even go deep on this. Any book recommendations of any kind?
Well, yes. Right now, I would highly recommend The Religion of the Apostles by Father Stephen DeYoung. It's really good. I haven't read his follow-up, which is God is a Man of War. I've heard wonderful things about that. I would go with Brother Augustine as far as a podcaster. I don't know if you're familiar with Brother Augustine, also Dissident Mama, definitely.
I just had Brother Augustine on a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
Michael Cisco. Books, okay. Henry Kissinger wrote an excellent book several years ago called Diplomacy. It's one of those thick ones like that. And it kind of gives you an idea of where his mind is at, a total realist. Not necessarily, I don't want to go into the background, but because a lot of people think he's a war criminal. Let's see, as far as political, boy, oh boy, I'm just kind of at a loss right now. They'll come to me.
No, that's all right. No worries.
But
this one will be
Sir Stephen Runciman, The Great Church in Captivity. Okay, Aristides Papadakis wrote the Christian East and the Rise of the Papacy. Dmitry Ouspensky wrote Byzantium and the Slavs. Those are socio-cultural religious books. Okay.
Sure.
So yeah, political. I'm still a little lost, except for the ones that I just gave you.
Well, I got a super easy one for you now. Plug away at anything that's really your blog. Tell people where they can find that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Monomakhos.com, and just plug it in. And it's just, it's about politics, culture, and religion from a very right-wing perspective. I would say dissident right. Okay. And, that's it's a labor of love. And I couldn't do it without my lovely wife, I got to tell you.
And not everyone is going to be so fluent with even the accent or how to say some Greek words. Mm-hmm. How would they spell that?
Oh, I'm sorry. M as in Michael, O, N as in Nancy, O, M as in Michael, A, Khos, Monomakhos, which means he who fights alone. Obviously, I don't fight alone anymore, but I don't know why I came up with that idea. I was just fascinated by the cap of Monomach, which was the cap of or the crown of the Russiagate dynasty. And it was attributed to Vladimir Monomach, who was the Grand Duke of Kiev. Vladimir Monomach was the grandson on his mother's side of Constantine the IX Monomakhos, a Byzantine emperor. So I just like the name Monomakhos. It begins with an M. My last name begins with an M. There you go. Nothing more to it than that. I guess the continuation of the Byzantine Commonwealth from Constantinople to Kiev. I don't know.
There you go. Well, I'm going to link to it in the show notes page for this episode. Yes, sir. Of course. George, thank you so much for being here with us on Counterflow. I've appreciated this.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and onward and upward.
Yes, sir.
As I like to say, Pax vobiscum, peace be among you. So hopefully that will break out. We'll see.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. I hope you guys learned some things from that interview with George. Thanks again, George, for doing that with us here. And again, there's a lot of propaganda out there being peddled. The machine is in hyper overdrive, much like the Federal Reserve pumping out cash. And so just be careful when you read things, do some research. Feel free to research everything that was said in this interview, because I'm not claiming to be the end-all, be-all of knowledge regarding Ukraine and Russia. I just thought George did some pretty good research on his own. I found the pieces very compelling and interesting, and I loved how they basically picked apart the mainstream corporate narrative that's being pumped out and had a seemingly more realistic take on what's really going on in Ukraine with Russia. As for this show, if you'd like to donate, I've got a Patreon page, patreon.com/counterflow. If you'd like to support us, go ahead and please do that. You know the website, counterflowpodcast.com. And like I said in the ad on this episode, I'm telling you, those Old Post road oils are the best. They really are. So go check them out, oldpostroadoils.com. And again, that's promo code BUCK at checkout. Get you free shipping. Try that aftershave oil for men, I'm telling you. And all you bearded guys out there, try that beard oil for men. And until next week, thank you guys so much for being here, and hope you have a great week. Talk to you soon.
You get split in fucking half, till I call on the hologram brass. but I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus, but I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.